Hello everyone, and welcome to the Health Partnership Support webinar, which we are running for all partnerships implementing projects under the HPS Accountable Grant Stream and the J&J Africa Grants Programme. Thank you very much for joining us today. So you should be able to hear me and be able to see our screen. You're all currently on mute, so we are not able to hear you. But just before we start, we'd like to reassure you that the PowerPoint presentation and the recording will be available after today in case you have any problems with connectivity or in seeing the slides. So just some quick introductions from us. I'm Laura McPherson, the Senior Grants Manager at THET, and I'm joined in the London office by Paris and Salman, grants officers and grants finance officer, and Sophie and B from the monitoring evaluation team. So that's the quality and learning manager and the monitoring and evaluation officer. So we'll each be speaking throughout the webinar to different points. So today we would like to present on a number of different topics, but mainly monitoring evaluation, financial management, narrative and financial reporting, so speaking mainly about those reports that are due in June, financial reporting, partnership management support, and then finally we'll have hopefully about half an hour at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So briefly, because we've got two different schemes running at the moment, we thought it would be nice to bring you all together because really the way that they're being run is quite similar, so we'll be sharing quite similar information to you. So some of you will be implementing a project under the Health Partnership Scheme this year. And to date, well, up until 2017, over 200 projects were implemented, and it was a £30 million scheme. And this year there's an extension, and under that 20 further projects have been awarded funding. So this is a scheme that's funded by DFID, and 12 health thematic areas have been covered by these partnerships in over 30 countries. So you can see that summarized very briefly here. The current projects are being implemented in Uganda, Ghana, Myanmar, Tanzania, and Zambia. If you do want any more information on the Health Partnership Scheme, do visit our website, and there are summaries of each of the projects being implemented there. So the Africa Grants Programme, some of you are implementing projects under that, and that's a newer programme that's been running since 2016. So this is the second iteration of the programme this year. What you see on the screen here is a summary of the projects that were implemented in the last year. So apologies for that. We are currently designing a new one for this year's programme. But last year, over 1,000 health workers were trained through 7 projects in Mauritania, Sierra Leone, Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Malawi. Again, you can find more details about this programme online. And this year, the projects have been being implemented in Sierra Leone, Uganda, South Africa, and Ghana. Oh, right. I think that's me done. So that was a very brief introduction, but I'll hand over now to Sophie, who will talk to you about monitoring evaluation.
Thanks, Laura. So while I set up the slides, okay, so my colleague Simon's just setting up the slides for my presentation. Sorry, I'll just start talking. Are we sharing screens, Simon? Yeah. We are? Laura, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'll just start talking because so we don't.
Oh, yes, we can see your screen now, Sophie.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so as Laura said, so I'm Sophie, I'm the Quality and Learning Manager at FET, and part of the role of my team is to support health partnerships with their monitoring evaluation plans and activities at each stage of their projects. Hopefully most of you will be familiar with me and may have supported you to develop your project M&E plans for your if you have any projects under the Health Partnership Scheme extension, or you may also have spoken to my colleague Beatrice, especially if you have any projects under the Johnson & Johnson Africa Grants programme that started in February this year. So the purpose of this session really is to discuss some of the main principles of effective monitoring, evaluation and learning as you move on from the inception phase to the actual implementation of your projects. So let's just remind ourselves of some of the key kind of monitoring evaluation definitions that are up on the screen. So what I'd like to say is that monitoring evaluation are interlinked, and it helps kind of evaluate the relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, impact and sustainability of health partnership projects. So yeah, both monitoring and evaluation are kind of integral. So monitoring is more to do with the kind of the routine, checking the progress of activities and outputs, whereas evaluation is the assessment of the value and impact of a project at a particular milestone. So why is monitoring evaluation useful? So there is that kind of quality assurance element. So knowing your partnership and your partners, knowing that how they are progressing, whether they're on track, whether the program has any unintended results, and whether change is happening as expected, and having the kind of concrete evidence to back this up. Accountability is also important, and here I'm not only talking about donors, but also the people that you serve for your project, and also the partners themselves. It also allows to influence others to receive more funding, but also to collaborate together. So at FET, we use this information to kind of understand the impact of the health partnership community as a whole, and also make a case for more health partnership funding in the future. And then finally, so monitoring evaluation, we also often add the L, which stands for learning. So learning is a very important purpose of monitoring evaluation. It's important to see what's going on well, what's not going well, if we can draw any lessons learned, both to make improvements while projects are running, so any adjustments or additional activities that need to take place, but also useful to reflect on lessons learned before the next phase, for instance, scale up, or for any kind of future strategic development. Next slide. Right. So I'll take this opportunity to again highlight the FET's principles of partnership. A lot of them speak to effective monitoring, evaluation and learning, like the ones I've got up on the screen right now. And if you're interested in learning more about the principles, please do visit our website. We have specific case studies and resources under each of these hallmarks. Right, so during the Health Partnership Inception event we had for Ugandan partners in February 2018, part of the session around M&E involved attendees discussing kind of 4 main aspects of the implementation of monitoring evaluation activities, which I've got here on the screen. So I would like to draw out some of the main points that were shared during these discussions between partners, especially on why these different points are important, how to do this effectively, and what are the challenges around collecting and analysing data. So the first point was collecting and analysing data in collaboration with relevant people in your partnership and projects. And participants discussed, well, why is this important? So here are some of the points that were drawn out from the discussion. So what I'd like to say in speaking to those points is that basically the more people are involved in monitoring evaluation and understand what it's like, what it's about, and how useful it is for the project and the partnership, you'll have increased capacity to collect data, to analyse data, and also potentially we encourage collaboration with kind of researchers and academics if that's useful for you as part of your M&E processes. Accountability is also an important point. So collaborating on monitoring evaluation, both in the UK and in country, it means that everyone has a sense of ownership of the data that's being collected, and everyone has a sense of responsibility of collecting evidence on how things are going. So how can you do that effectively? Well, one of the point raised was meetings. So I believe this relates to kind of meetings between partners, between UK and in-country partners, maybe having M&E as a standing agenda item, and also making sure that any data that's collected and analysed is fed back in these meetings and informs progress. A point that I added is kind of maybe designating an M&E lead, so it can be in the UK and overseas, just to make sure that the information and the processes for monitoring evaluation are organised and everyone knows how they're involved. So training is an interesting one, because I think it's not enough just to say, oh, we're going to go and collect that information. If you have local data collectors and health workers involved in collecting data, it's also a good way to make them understand why that information is being collected, and also get them on board with this. And also designing specific tools to help collect the data better. So if you have those data collection tools set up at the start of your project to collect the relevant information, you'll be able to kind of manage the whole process better. Challenges. Well, obviously it's not sometimes straightforward to collaborate on M&E. Obviously there's kind of the wider communication challenges between partners. Sometimes it's because of technology, sometimes it's because people are very busy. There's also finding reliable sources of data. So if you're planning to collect information from hospital records, well, do those hospital records actually give you sufficient information, the information that you're looking for? Is the data collection reliable? Data collection tools reliable? Does it rely mainly on self-assessment, self-reporting? So in monitoring evaluation, we talk a lot about triangulation. So collecting similar or same information from different sources, especially when you're not sure, enables to kind of confirm some of the findings and make it more robust. And again, another issue that was brought up is staffing. So staff can see data collection as a burden, so it's important to integrate it as much as possible to their regular work, their regular kind of record keeping, and also explain how useful it can be to inform their work. Another point that was discussed was collecting and analysing data on gender and disability. So why is it important? So it fits within the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Social inclusion is a really important part of the SDGs, and it's also linked to achieving universal health coverage. It's useful also to understand whether different people have access to both training and also health services. Someone helpfully pointed out that it's also a grant requirement, so part of the criteria to get health partnership scheme funding was for projects to consider how their projects will benefit women, girls and people with disabilities. And also it's knowledge and learning for health workers, so maybe health workers will be more aware of kind of the challenges that are faced by patients, both to access the services and to access care. How? Well, how to collect this data. So anonymous surveys was one of the tools that was discussed, and that also begs the question around kind of confidentiality. So people might be more inclined to answer questions around, for instance, disability if it's anonymous. I'll explain why later. Health workers themselves are usually the first point of contact for patients and communities, so they'll be able to make an assessment and provide that information. Again, integrating this type of type of questions to data collection tools and breaking it down by gender and disability is useful. With your reporting template, you should have received some guidance on collecting data on disability, which I hope you'll find useful. And so obviously this can be a challenge. So for instance, undisclosed data, difficult to ask people to disclose their disability. So this can be an issue because not everyone will want to answer the question, because there's wider issues of discrimination and stigmatization around disability, for instance, or around gender. Or maybe even the local data collectors themselves will not see the value of collecting this type of information. So it's very important to have data protection rules in place, and also to explain to local partners and data collectors why this information needs to be collected. And lastly, an interesting point that was mentioned during the session at the Uganda event is BMET, so that refers to biomedical engineers, are mostly men, so unable to collect female data. So it's an interesting, because obviously in health, some health professions will be more male or female dominated, but I think it is an excuse to try and collect data on gender and integrate that to the data collection tools, because I'm sure there are some women biomedical engineers. The third point discussed was collecting and analysing data on contributions to health system changes. So why is it important? So basically, although health worker is at the centre of what we do, and training health workers is kind of the main part of a lot of projects, I guess in a way you can't view that in isolation, and especially to ensure sustainability, it's about making sure that the health system can support those health workers, and that the health systems themselves can be consolidated. So a lot of you will have developed specific indicators that speak to the wider health system strengthening, and it was something that was mentioned also in the Health Partnership grant call. How? Well, as I said, establish the indicators, but also reviewing the health system. So making sure that you get a sense of the health system in the first place, and how your project can strengthen the health system. Looking at data that's collected by the health authorities themselves to inform how your project has contributed to changes, but also meeting with local stakeholders to get a sense of their engagement and commitment to the project, and to kind of integrate this into the health system. Some of the challenges are, obviously it's quite a challenging process. The data collection can be difficult because you need to establish which data is reliable. You might have to set up your own tools that look at signs of how your project is influencing the health system. But also, one of the main challenges is that health system changes may take time, and your project is very limited in the time frame. So you'll have to look at the impact beyond the duration of your project, and just make sure that the indicators that you've developed for your current project does in some way show the progress towards achieving health system strengthening. The final point that was discussed, it was how having a data management system and analysis process in place for your project was important. And so basically, I think it's just making the point that collecting data isn't enough in itself. You have to think about how that data is being managed, how it's being stored and analysed and used effectively and shared among your project stakeholders and partners. How can it be done? So again, designating an M&E lead, both in the UK and overseas, with relevant expertise is useful to manage the databases and the analysis process. The time frame is very important because it's not only collecting the data, but when you're actually going to be able to analyze it, and you might want to time that also when with your reporting to FET. So whether there's enough time to analyze the data from various data collection activities to be able to report on progress. Some of the challenges are around, for instance, data protection. So how is the information being stored? Who has access to it? How to ensure that sensitive information, for instance, patient information or information on disability, is not being compromised. Time frame again, which I already mentioned, and also I think I was trying to make the point around the analysis relies on the information collected. So if there are gaps in the data collection, or if the quality isn't good or reliable, it will obviously impact on the quality of the analysis. So it's very important for any analyst to inform and communicate with data collectors on any issues around the data that they're receiving. So finally, we do have quite a lot of resources on our website on M&E, so please do have a look at that. And as hopefully you should all have received also your report templates, but also with some guidance documents like the reporting FAQs and the guidelines on how to collect disability data. Okay, so I'd also like to thank Theo, who is an M&E consultant involved in a health partnership, and my colleagues Paris and Salman for facilitating the M&E workshop in Uganda. If you have any questions, please contact me by email or give me a call.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie. So the next presentation that we're going to do is going to be on financial management. And just bear with me, here we go. I hope you can all see the screen and hear me. So yes, I'm Salman Sher. I'm the Grants and Finance Officer here at THET. Actually, so during the Inception event that we had in Uganda, we did mention that we were working on developing a grant financial management toolkit, which we have done now, and at least the HPS partnerships should all have received it. Apologies to the Africa Grants Program partnerships who are we're still finalizing some of the supporting documents, so hopefully we'll send that out to you as soon as possible. But this presentation will give you an overview of what we're trying to cover in the toolkit. So, okay. So the main areas that the Grant Financial Management Toolkit covers are around just decision making. So you know, who will take responsibility for the financial management? Will it be shared, or will it be, you know, the UK partner taking management and responsibility of the budget and financial management? And then managing the finances through budgets and the processes which are in place, and then finally reporting to THET, and this is basically the 6 monthly financial reports that all grant holders are required to submit. So the first point on decision making refers to who will be managing the finances. And I guess the main point here is communicating openly to discuss the details of how the finances should be managed. So you may decide that funds should only be managed by the UK partner, but sometimes it might make more sense for some of the funds to be managed overseas as well. Some of the things to consider when you're making your decision are, can some of the costs, would they be paid for more easily in country, so such as travel costs and venue hire for training, and any office equipment that you might want to purchase as well. And another consideration might be that do the overseas partners have sufficient capacity to manage the finances, and there should be an appointed person within the finance team who manages the project funds, and who has time to dedicate to the project. And one final consideration could be that are there appropriate systems in place, checks and balances, internal controls to manage the finances, and these should all be set out in a finance policy, and various other policies like procurement, and then processes for authorization of expenses and delegation, and segregation of duties. So within the partnership, it's also important to manage expectations and establish whether or not the funds are going to be managed by the UK or both partners. And some of these expectations might be that what can and can't be funded using grant funds, such as per diems, and I think everyone's aware of that. And all individuals involved in project and budget management should have access to the budget. And this again goes back to the point of communication, and having having access to the budget is really important, so that everyone's aware of budget lines and budget limits and the amount that they have to spend. There might be some additional donor requirements, for example, under the HPS, that you keep all your receipts for expenditure. The finance report includes a provision for detailed transaction lists, and then that, as part of the review process, will carry out a receipt spot check, using the information provided in the transaction list. Roles and responsibilities of partners in terms of who will manage the budget and the finance management. I guess that's kind of repeating what we're saying. And then something quite important that we like to stress is the fraud, bribery, and corruption, which that has a zero tolerance policy for, and we would also expect grant holders to communicate this to their project teams, and communicate a clear stance on fraud, bribery, and corruption to all staff across the partnership, including through a fraud policy on induction of staff. The other thing to consider is quite important that for partnerships managing funds jointly, that you have a memorandum of understanding or a subcontract which covers the financial arrangements, and is signed by all partners involved. And we do have an example of what a financial arrangement section in a memorandum of understanding might look like, which is included in the toolkit, but we can also forward you an example of a memorandum of understanding as well, should you need one. Onto budget management. So managing your budget can become quite complicated and time consuming, especially if you're managing the funds jointly. And so you might want to consider some of the procedures and having them in place to ensure that managing the budget is as efficient as possible. So funds should only be sent to your overseas partners via bank transfer, or wherever possible, and to an account within the overseas institution, and not via cash or an external bank account unless that bank account's been nominated in advance and in agreement with debt. And we suggest this only because it's better to ensure the accountability as the funds then go through formal financial channels. The overseas partners should invoice the UK partner, and then the UK partner should then send the funds via bank transfer, preferably prior to activities taking place. And then for any underspends, these can be carried over to the next quarter or for the next activity. For any overspends, they could either be carried over again to the next quarter, or the UK partner could then invoice the overseas partner. But just bearing in mind that the overseas partner should be discussing any large cost with the UK partner before the fact of spending. Accounts should be reconciled regularly to keep on top of things, and then also you may want to send expenditure sheets to the overseas partners to fill them out and return them with actual expenditure against the planned expenditure, along with the receipts on a regular basis. So the reports are due on a 6-monthly basis. You should try and do your own reconciliations much more regularly than that, so that you have all the data and information in place for reporting, and that any issues can be addressed in time. So that encourages partnerships to provide monthly expenses to short and long-term volunteers in advance to cover local travel and subsistence costs, rather than asking volunteers for receipts for all small expenses following the fact. Signed receipts for expenses forms should be kept on file, as again, they could be requested for by THET during the spot checks. Again, just to reiterate that good communication between the partnership finance teams and budget holders is really important. You could have regular Skype meetings and emails, regular emails, and this could help with dealing with project budgets to build stronger relationships and to manage the budgets more effectively. And at least one in-country meeting a year to touch base on finance with the finance team and to discuss the budget is also recommended. Okay. Another, I guess, quite an issue that's been raised quite a few times, particularly during the last HPS call scheme, was exchange rate and how to deal with exchange rate fluctuations. And so we've tried to include some guidance on this in the toolkit. And what we tried to cover is how to manage any fluctuations and setting of appropriate exchange rates. Because funding from THET will always be in pounds, and as will the budgeting and reporting against that budget, and then due to the nature of some of the partnerships, if not the majority of expenditure, some of it is likely to be in non-UK currency. and the currency of the country of implementation. And then so exchange rates between UK currency and local currency could have a significant impact on the reported expenditure as compared to what you had budgeted. And so in order to plan accordingly, we would encourage you to make sure that you're aware of any of the risks of exchange rate variability. When preparing your budget, you should take a view on the exchange rate used for expenditure in the local currency. That the budget submitted at your application stage is going to remain fixed. The exchange rate used for reporting your actuals is likely to vary according to the actual rate during the transfer of funds or expenditure. And then this variation can lead to over and underspend. And then since budgets are fixed in UK currency, the impact of fluctuation within the project budgets will have to be borne by the grant holders, but you might want to consider some of the following practices to mitigate against exchange rate fluctuations, including budget contingency. So you could allow for unfavorable exchange rate variances. Some you might anticipate, others not, by allocating a small percentage of your project budget to this specific contingency. And I think some of you might have already done that, and including for bank charges as well. One other option is to explore different exchange bureaus and the rates being offered by them, as some of them might be more favourable than the rates being offered by your banking service provider, both in the UK and in country. And then also to look at the different options available for setting appropriate exchange rates. And some of these are listed here, so I will briefly go through them. I believe that a lot of partnerships operate in a system of periodic lump sum transfers in pounds to their lead in-country partners. The exchange rate applied at the point of transfer can then be used in reporting your transactions in the period which the transfer took place. If you're making multiple transfers, it's appropriate to use an average rate for reporting. And then there's various different rates you could use. A daily spot rate, which is on the day of transaction, and then reporting that, using that to report your actual expenditure. And in the toolkit, there are links to some sources where you might be able to obtain these rates. And these are resources that uses and have been recommended by DFID as well. So yes, daily spot rates, average rates as well, these are all available through these sources, and then a daily market rate, which the daily market rate is recommended as most applicable during your budgeting and forecasting process. But some or maybe most of the institutions may already have your own internal guidance on the calculation of exchange rates, and we're happy for you to use these. And again, the point here is really to communicate with your internal finance departments to see what kind of guidance they can offer or what their own practices are. And one other aspect of budget management is how to make efficient international transfers and withdrawals over the length of your project. And so before making a transfer, you should agree a budget that shows how much money will be spent, and then this should be split into the different budget lines. So in accordance with the budget that you've submitted with your application and which has been agreed. And then transfers can be made to the in-country institution's bank account, avoiding transferring funds to individual bank account, an individual's bank account. And then remember, please, to keep all your statements and transaction sheets and all receipts and quotes so that you can compile accurate financial records and accounts, account for all the funds that have been given. Okay, so financial management. So all partners should ensure that minimum standards for financial management are in place at both the UK and Overseas Institute, and that the project budget is managed through these systems. And as a minimum, we would request all partners that manage finances to ensure that some of the following are in place. I mentioned this earlier, about a finance policy that covers the controls and checks and balances, and with clear communication, which is clearly communicated to all staff. A procurement policy which outlines clear instructions for purchases of different types of expenditure, and again, which is clearly communicated to staff. Regular audits, both internal and external, and as well as for systems as well. And then all payment request forms and receipts are kept on file, and records of transactions are updated regularly, and that the appropriate staff assigned to authorize expenditure, and with the person authorizing payments being different to the person requesting the purchase, which creates a segregation of duties and is a good control. And finally, reporting to THET. As you know, yes, partnerships are required to report on a 6-monthly basis, including a financial report. And we'll go through the template in a bit more detail later on. But for now, just giving you an overview and some detail as well. Yes, HPS-funded projects are required to submit a financial report detailing your expenditure against your budget, and then we will then review these reports for completeness, accuracy, and then making sure that they correspond with the activities that you're reporting in your narrative reports for the period. Okay, so when you're compiling the report, this can be quite time consuming, particularly if you're relying on information from different sources, for example, from project managers and from finance departments, and then in-country leads as well. So please do plan ahead and allow sufficient time for follow-up prior to submitting your financial report, hopefully within your deadline. Aside from the main report where you submit your actual expenditure, we also require a transaction list, a detailed transaction list, and as a minimum, this should include every individual payment made either by budget line or chronologically, the expenditure, the transactions should reference the relevant budget line from the main report, and the date of transaction, a brief description of transaction and the amount, and in case of any in-country partner invoices, please break these down for each invoice. And please also ensure that the total value of transactions in the list matches that in the main finance report. And I will cover more of this in the financial reporting section later on. But thanks for that. And I will pass you on to my colleague Beatrice.
Right, hello everyone, I'm Bea. I am the Evaluation and Learning Officer here at THET, so I've taken over responsibility for some of your MEL project plans. So accountable grant holders should have received a personalised copy of the narrative reporting template earlier this week, along with a guidance document which should help you answer the questions better, and a disability guidance document for capturing data around disability. So that should have been the HPS accountable grant people. AGP grant holders should receive their narrative template around May time, so about 3 months before they're expected to report in August. So while the reporting template might not be exactly the same, there will be areas that mirror it, so it might also be useful for AGP people to take note of some of the things I'm going to discuss. Okay, so as mentioned in the letter that was also sent out with your reporting templates, the deadline for submitting reports, both the financial and the narrative, is the 15th of June, and that's at the very latest. So we do have a very tight turnaround time for us to submit our report to DFIDs. It's just 2 weeks. So if it is possible for you to submit your report earlier, then we'd really welcome that. And also, because of the nature of the short turnaround, we would also request that you're as responsive to any questions that we've got during that period as possible. Okay, so many of you will be familiar with the majority of this reporting template. It's quite similar to ones that we've sent out in the past. However, there are a couple of new questions and sections to pick up on, mainly around gender and disability. So I'm just going to highlight some of the areas that I think it's important for you to pick up on and fill in a certain way. But obviously, for more information on how to complete the different sections of the report, do refer to the reporting FAQs guidance document that we sent out with the template. And as always, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with either your grants officers, so Salman or Paris, or your M&E point of contact, so myself or Sophie. Okay, so firstly, who should complete the narrative report? So it's important that all of the partners within the partnership have an input into the report. So we've sent out the template 3 months before it needs submitting, and this is in part to give all of the partners the opportunity to discuss the questions and then input where necessary. So although a lot of the template is kind of updating us on your progress and any data that you've collected, some of the template does require specific input from all of the partners. So section 5 is around lessons learned, and we do require each of the partners to fill that in. Okay, so section 2, progress against your activity plan and project activities. So your MEL manager will have populated this section for you based on the activities that you originally described in your project application, and these are broken down by quarter. So if you have delivered or are planning on delivering any activities that we haven't recorded here, then do add them in at the bottom. So there's also a section 2.2 and 2.3 where you can kind of describe why it is that there are any changes or delays or cancellations. And we do say, remember that we always ask you to inform your grants manager as soon as possible when you know that there will be a major delay or change to your activities. And this is just so that if DFID asks us about it, we can tell them and we're not surprised by anything. Okay, so section 3.1 is progress against indicators. So again, your MEL manager should have pre-populated this grid with change indicators that you expressed in your MEL planning template, which you should have done with Sophie a couple of months ago. And it might be that these changes have have changed slightly by the time you come to reporting, particularly if you've had delays or changes to your activities or project. And if this is the case, then there is a section 3.3 where you can make a note of this. So please include clearly your progress against targets. So this should be expressed quantitatively in the current data column of this grid. And then you can expand on this further, so giving it explanations for your progress in more qualitative terms if you use the two right-hand columns for that. So this quantitative data, we would like you to disaggregate it where relevant by cadre and gender. So this should be multi-dimensional. For example, if you have 5 nurses, you should state that 2 of them are male and 3 of them are female, in that kind of way. And we also ask that you include information about anybody you're training who's got a disability. So you can refer to your original M&E plan for the appropriate breakdown of this. If you do have sections that are missing in this, then we do ask you to populate that as well. It might be that you were waiting to gather data from a baseline or something. It would be good if you could include that when you submit to us, if not beforehand. So in the last column of this grid, you can describe the data collection methods and tools used, any limitations and barriers that you've encountered, and do include any further information or evidence that you think might be relevant to include, that you think that we should know about. So we do know that this is quite a small grid and there might not be enough room for you to include all of the information that you like. So we say that the main information about your report should be included in this report, but if you've got other information that you would like to share with us, then you're welcome to attach other relevant documents, but just bear in mind that this is going to be very time limited, so it might be that we don't have time to explore in detail those extra documents. Okay, so at this stage, we do only need you to report on the first set of change indicators that relate to the changes that you expected to see by the middle of your project. You're completely welcome to include any other data that you've got, but we're not necessarily expecting you to do that. So within this section, we've also highlighted one of your change indicators that we would like you to provide a data collection tool for. So if you've sent out a survey, you could give us that kind of thing. So we do usually ask for this at feedback stage, but given the limited time frame, we've asked for this up front. So if you've got any questions or problems expressing or delivering any of this data, then do just speak to your mail manager as soon as possible. If you have got a problem, it's important not to wait to contact us until the deadline, because by this point it might be too late to come up with any alternative data. Okay, moving on. So the next section I'd like to highlight is 3.4.3, benefit to women, girls and people with disabilities. So you might not have encountered this section before in your reporting to us, but this is an area that DFID have highlighted as one which they particularly want data on, showing how the Health Partner Scheme has benefited these groups of people. So we'd like you to tell us how your project is benefiting these groups. So this could include the health workforce that you're training. So you could comment on how you're targeting trainees who are women, but it also does include the patients that you're reaching through your project, and it might even be within your partnerships themselves. So with the reporting template that we sent out this week, we did attach some guidance on measuring people who've benefited from your projects that have got disabilities. I think Sophie mentioned it earlier. So do refer to this when you're thinking about how to gather this information. Also, so especially around disability, some of this data might be sensitive, so it might be worth thinking about how you could anonymize this data or at least keep it protected. Okay, the next section I want to talk about is 3.4.4, which is other population groups reached. So this section of the report is in relation to the patients that your new or improved services have reached. So part of DFID's mission is to reach excluded or marginalised groups, and so we have included this in it because they will ask for this information in the final report. So some of these groups are fairly self-explanatory, but others you might have a little bit more difficulty in defining. So, for example, the ethnic or minority groups section of this grid. So it's not the point of ethnic minority groups is that they will vary from country to country. So we would define them as a group within a community which has different national or cultural traditions from the main population. So this might not apply to all projects or all circumstances. So do make a note of it in the right hand column of this grid if you don't think that applies to the country that you're working in. Similarly, if it does apply, then make a note of the minority groups which you have reached. So it might be that your project is specifically targeting one of these groups. So for example, at risk populations, you might be targeting people with HIV/AIDS. So do just, again, make a note of this in the right hand column. We do understand that it might be difficult for you to gather this information, particularly regarding patients, but it's something that we need to include in our final report to DFID. So it would be good if you could think now about how you could go about capturing this information. We don't expect you to provide us with exact figures for these, but we'd like to see that you're at least trying to engage with these groups. Again, if you're facing any difficulties gathering this data, then do discuss it with your mail manager, and there might be some way that we can give you support on that. Okay, so section 3.5.1, number of health workers participating in training and mentoring. So the guidance has got further details on completing this table, kind of giving you definitions of each of the different columns. But in this section, we want information on both the health workers trained in service delivery and the trainers who are trained to be trainers as part of the project. So in each case, we want you to disaggregate the health workers who have been trained dependent on the type of trainer who trained them. So this could be trainers who were trained through the project, it could be UK volunteers, it could be a mixture of both of them. And we would also like you to disaggregate these numbers based on cadre, gender, and whether the person has a disability or not. Section 3.5.3, the volunteer professional development. So this includes a link to a survey that we would like you to, we'd encourage you to send out to all of your volunteers to complete once they've returned to the UK and they have had an annual appraisal. So this might include volunteers from past projects. It doesn't necessarily relate to just this one. So it's just important that you're aware of this survey, because in the report we ask you how many people you sent it out to. So obviously you need to send it out to them before the report is due. Section 4.1, partnership development goals. So many of you will have had your quarterly progress meetings in the last couple of weeks, or have got them due in the next week or so. And during them, we've discussed with you the partnership agreement, which you completed during your inception phase, so around November time. We've asked you in this report to think about 2 or 3 areas, dependent on your the size of your grant, where you as a partnership think you could strengthen your partnership or relationship between partners. So this could be in a number of areas. It could be communication, organisational buy-in, volunteer management. But for THET, the Health Partnership Scheme is not just about developing strong projects, but also about building strong, sustainable partnerships that can sustain into the future. And we'd like to support you to do this. So what I would advise you to do is, with your partners, go back to your original partnership agreement that you filled in November, and assess whether the areas that you highlighted then as weaknesses still apply, or whether through the course of your project you've identified new ones, new areas that you could work on. So as with other areas of your project, think about what's feasible or realistic, but this is quite a good opportunity to think about the sustainability of your project or partnership, how it will sustain into the future. So you could refer to THET's principles of partnerships for examples of areas which would make a strong partnership. Okay, section 4.2, partnership examples. So that are always keen to collect case studies from projects highlighting examples of partnerships working together successfully. And this time we'd like you to give us an example of how you've demonstrated good shared ownership. So you could give us an example of what's been successful, challenges you've faced, or how you've dealt with them. Section 5, the lessons learned. This is the section where we particularly want to make sure that there's input from both lead partners. So we require both partners to answer this separately, because quite often there's different learning that would otherwise get lost if we just ask for some more general lessons. And finally, section 6 on THET's performance. So we're very keen to assess our own performance in supporting you through the HPS grant making process. So we would appreciate any feedback that you could provide us in this section. There's a link to a short SurveyMonkey anonymous survey where you can anonymously leave your feedback regarding THET's performance. Okay, so just to summarise, deadline is the 15th of June, preferably before then. Remember to disaggregate your data based on gender, cadre, disability. It's good to get a balance between detail and key information. We want reflection for both partners. Don't forget to attach your data collection tool, and any problems at all, contact your grants manager or your mail manager. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly cover the finance report. I know I've covered some of it in the last of the grant financial management session. If I can get my mouse to work, that would be really helpful. So yes, I will go through it quickly. I know that I'm conscious of time, and we want to have enough time at the end for questions. Okay. Right. Okay, so I think all of you should be familiar with the finance report and what's required. The requirements are very similar to the previous HPS reports, and but I appreciate that we've slightly altered the format of the reports, and so now they're divided into different sections for all the changes that you've proposed in your for your projects. So that's really the only difference. So quickly, at the top of the report, you'll be asked to fill in the project information data. So please do remember to complete that before you submit it. It's basic data about the institution, the title of the project, and then who compiled it. And so similar to what B was saying earlier, I guess it's important to have input from everyone who's involved in managing the budget, like we talked about earlier. So making sure that the data provided is complete. What we've sent the HPS, all the HPS partners, their templates. They've all been populated according to the phase budgets that you've all submitted. So the budget columns should already be populated and locked, and these are all in accordance to the phase budgets that you've all submitted. What we require for grant holders to do is to populate the actual column, which is highlighted here, with all your actual expenditure, and then provide notes for any variances or notes which you feel would be helpful in us understanding your expenditure when we review the report. So it's really these two columns that need to be populated. The template is locked, and that's really to preserve the formulas and also the integrity of the data that's already in there and the data that you provide. But if you have any trouble, any issues, please do let me know. Either myself or Paris, your grant manager, know, so that we can make any changes if need be. Because we have used your phase budget that you've provided, hopefully you won't have to add any extra lines. But if you do, then please let either Paris or myself know, and we can do that for you. There's a new section at the bottom of the report, and it's for in-kind contributions. And this really is about THET and DFID trying to understand the value for money aspect of each project, and so this is why we've included this section. And just maybe briefly giving an explanation of what in-kind contributions are. Again, this is included in the financial management toolkit. In-kind contributions could include any use of services, including professional services, accounting or legal, and provision of any provision or access to equipment. You should include any items that you feel are necessary to achieve the goals agreed in your project plan, and you would have had to pay for otherwise if they were not provided for free of charge. But if you have any other questions about how to fill this section in, please do let me know, or give me a call, and maybe we can talk it through in a bit more detail. And then the other aspect of the finance report is a transaction list. And so, as I was saying earlier, please make sure that you provide all the requested data, or the requested details, so referencing the budget, the date, amount, and description of each transaction, and then make sure that the total of your transaction list matches the total of your financial report. And some of the things that we will be looking out for in the finance report I've outlined here in this checklist. So yes, making sure that the information provided is accurate and it all adds up, a full transaction list, and that there is a relationship between the finances that you've reported and the activities that have taken place in the reporting period. And then just looking at the variances, and if the variances, any sort of significant variances, have been adequately explained, and that your expenditure remains within the percentage limits. So for project management, 20%, and also similarly for equipment. And the final thing is a receipt spot check. So we'll be using your transaction list to ask for receipts to verify the financial reports before any further funds are transferred. So thanks for that. I know it's quite brief, but hopefully it's not too onerous, and that you're quite familiar with the process. But if you have any questions, please do let me know. Thank you.
Hello everybody, Paris here. So I was going to cover a few things that we have in place to support you during the lifetime of your grant with us. But I think for time purposes, and because I want to give you an opportunity for you guys to ask any questions you have about the reporting elements, because that's quite important, I think I'll just highlight one thing and then open up the floor to questions, and then I can send you some more information about the list of things that I have on here. I just wanted to highlight about the THET country office, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, that we have a few country offices. So for those who don't, I'll just highlight where they are. So we have one in Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, Myanmar, and I just wanted to say that they are there to support you in any way they can, in any way that's feasible and logical for them. So what I'd encourage you to do is get in touch with them, and you can get in touch with me and Salman and get their contacts, and we can kind of get you in touch with them. Please do be aware that they obviously are managing other projects, so they may not be able to get in touch with you as quickly as you would like, or offer you extensive support, but please do, get in touch with them if you have any questions, and they will get back to you, let you know whether it's feasible for them to help you in that way or not. But obviously Salman and I, as your grant officers, are your first point of contact in terms of project implementation, budgeting, anything like that. And then Sophie and Bia there to support you in your mail. And obviously Laura as well, who's the senior grants manager, is also there as an extra added support. So yeah, so I think I'll open up the floor to questions. Just bear with me. I'll just look at the comment box.
So you can ask questions by typing them in. There's a chat function that you should be able to see. So if you can type your question there, we'll be able to read them out and answer. And if there's any questions we can't cover, we can follow up by email.
We have received one question so far. It's from Asha. She was asking if Salman can clarify or reiterate the point that you were making about volunteer expenses. Salman, would you be able to
Okay.
speak on that point again?
Oh, okay. So, yes. So, what we were saying earlier about volunteer expenses. So, there's something that we recommended was that that partnerships provide monthly expenses to their volunteers in advance to cover their travel, so that they don't have to, so that they're not, using their own funds to pay for costs like local travel and subsistence, and then rather than asking for volunteers for receipts for small expenses and reimbursing the expenses afterwards after they spent their own money. So that was the point I was making. I hope that's helpful, Asha.
Thank you, Salman. We have a question from Alison Hall in regards to support for visa applications. So Salman and I are able to write supporting letters for visa applications for in-country people coming to the UK. So what you need to just get in touch with us, then we will ask you for a few details, and then we can get that sent to you, and that will be signed by Ben, the CEO here, and on a letter-headed paper from THET, so to help you with that. Also, Paul, so it depends on which country you're working, but I'll talk about the Uganda office. So you have Paul and Sheila there who can help with that as well, give you advice on if you are having trouble getting your visa approved, and they can help you in terms of what documents you need to send and to help strengthen your application. And also the Uganda Health Alliance are there to support as well. So I can follow up those details in the resource and support pack that I'll send to everybody following on this webinar. We have a question from Malvina. It would be useful to share experiences with other volunteers regarding successful data collection process on outcomes, i.e. patients benefiting from training. So I think I'll pass this on to Sophie or Bit. Just want to comment on to that.
Okay, yeah, thanks for your question, Malvina. Very good question. Yeah, so we understand that collecting patient level data is quite challenging, especially if projects are focusing on kind of the health workers and training the health workers. Partnerships in the past have asked, for instance, health workers to kind of keep records of the number of patients that they're seeing through logbooks, for example. And some of them also have used kind of existing hospital records if appropriate, that they can access them to be able to see, for instance, which patients are accessing, for instance, a new eye health clinic that's been set up. But I take your point, and maybe where we would be able to, for instance, share more examples and possibly organise a webinar in the future for health partnerships to be able to share more of their experience in that regard.
Thank you, Sophie. We have another question from Godwin, who asks, can we revisit our objectives and modify them to fit some issues that we have that have arisen during implementation?
Yeah, so I think that also relates to the monitoring and evaluation plan. So there is space within your report templates. I know that the Health Partnership scheme projects, you will have received them, but not the Africa Grants Programme yet. But there will be space in your report to let us know if you want to change any of your objectives and indicators. And you're also very welcome to discuss these as they arise during your quarterly progress meetings.
Okay, so I have a question from Lizzie Rafi Tabar with regards to in-kind contribution. Does the in-kind contribution include volunteers' time towards supporting the project both UK and abroad? No, it doesn't. So the volunteer time and contribution is already captured in your mail plan and the reports. So this isn't. So the in-kind contribution is anything in addition to that. I hope that helps, Lizzie. We have another question from Claire Rhodes on collecting data on gender and disability. Can you clarify what sort of consent you expect us to get from participants? Is this verbal, written? Do you have an example?
Yeah, very good question. I might not be able to answer all of that in the webinar, but I can follow up with you later. I think a useful document to refer to is the guidance on collecting data on disability that's been shared with the Health Partnership Scheme projects along with their reporting templates. There is a section around consent and data protection and any ethical concerns around that in there that's relevant to collecting data on disability, but also relevant to gender. But we, and there are examples of good practice, but I think we would expect you to at least have a written kind of information document when you're asking the question or interviewing, for instance, patients or health workers, so that they understand the full extent of how the information is going to be used and how it's going to be shared, if there are any concerns around confidentiality, and they should give their consent. So either by signing or by the data collecting confirming, if they can't sign for whatever reason, that's been discussed with them. But please do have a look at that document and let me know if you have any further questions around that.
Okay, we have another question, and it's from Edmund. Do we need to fill in the notes for variance within the 10% over under budget? No, it's only really anything above 10% or below 10% that we would ask for notes in the finance report. If there's going to be a significant underspend and you're going to you're going to rebudget that, or you're going to use that expenditure in the next period, then you might want to include those kind of notes as well.
So we've got another question from Alison about whether the visa support letters, I'm assuming you mean, can we also write those for UK volunteers going overseas? Yes, we definitely can. So just get in touch with us with those details and we'll be able to provide that for you. So we have Chris would like to ask a question to Salman in regards to finance. So I'll just try and open the mic. Okay, Chris, can you hear us? Can you talk?
Chris?
Yeah, hi.
We can hear you.
Good. We spoke earlier when we were putting the grant application together about the sort of budget template. and it's quite complicated because quite a lot of the expenditure is actually spread over a number of different change areas. Would it be possible to take out the first general costs element of the template and send that through to you separately, so that the proportionate amount that we're spending on each of the different change elements can then be reflective of the percentage that we've applied within our original application? Complicated, I know.
I might need to have a look at your I need to have a look at your budget to answer that question. So can I get back to you on that once I've had
I'll give you a call sometime. Okay.
Well, let me I'll have a look at it this afternoon, and I'll drop you an email, and then we can organise a time.
Okay, that's great, lovely. And just to say to Godwin that maybe when we have our Skype session next week, we can talk about these different objectives and indicators.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay, cheers then.
Bye. Okay, is there
any other questions?
So if there are no other questions, and then Paris, maybe do you want to cover some more of the support?
Yeah, sure, I can.
Let's share screens first. Yeah. So we're just going to share screens with you again.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, 1 second. Okay.
Okay, great. So I won't go into reporting because I think that's been covered. So in terms of webinars, we do, if you have received funding from us before, either from J&J, so the Africa Grants Programme, or the HPS scheme, you will be familiar that we do hold regular webinars where we on a particular theme. So we've had one on mental health, WHO Safe Surgery Checklist. So this is an opportunity for projects to come together and share their experiences with each other on the, what they're doing, their health theme, and an opportunity to showcase your projects and what you're doing. So we will be holding regular ones again this year, and we will be in touch about that. So it'd be really great if you are interested in sharing in that particular theme, then please do get in touch and respond so we can let you know the next steps. Again, sharing and learning events. So we've had a few. So we've had one in the UK, that was back in 2015. Then we had one in Tanzania and in Uganda just recently, which Sophie mentioned. So we hope to, if possible, have another one this year. So we will be in touch if that's going to happen. We also have our resource library online, which has a number of resources that you can tap into that can help you during your project to help you. So we have, UK visa application guidelines, MOU, how to create an MOU, how to start a health partnership. That obviously wouldn't be applicable to you, but for other people who aren't currently in a health partnership and would like to have one. Volunteer support, so best way to support your volunteers, guidance on that. Duty of care toolkit, the fraud and bribery and corruption toolkit, which Salman mentioned. And I've also talked about the support letter. So again, some of you may be aware of the Community of Practice Forum, which is an area where people engaging in health partnerships and working in global health can come together and network and share ideas. And we have about over 500 members here. So this is a really good opportunity. So if you're having an event, we'd like to find out about insurances or anything in terms of what you're doing. It's really good to get in touch with people there who are doing the same thing and can offer you some great advice. We also do have the HPS Facebook page as well, which does the same thing as the Community of Practice. So please do sign up to these, and I will send you links on how to do this after this webinar. And many of you should be familiar with the principles of partnership. So these are 8 hallmarks where we think, you know, encourages and ensures that you are operating and implementing your project in a safe and in a good way and in a responsible way. So if you are not familiar with them, please do get familiar with them. And again, I'll share you the link on how to do this. And also, this is really good, as Sophie and Bea mentioned about the partnership assessment, and we will be asking you to let us know on how you're trying to strengthen your partnership and this time from what you wrote in your partnership assessment back in November. And this would be a good place to start. And we do have case studies which can kind of help you start thinking in that kind of way. And then we have the Vet Health Survey, which is another tool to help you start thinking about, you know, reflecting on how your partnership is working against a certain number of areas, communication, etc. And this is just a way for you just to work together with your in-country team and look at areas that you need strengthening on areas that you are doing well in. And it'll also be really good for you to share that with us, which we can share with other partnerships who, let's say, are not doing as well in certain areas, and give them those kind of support. And then we have monitoring visits. So this is when the grants and mail team and communications team will be conducting monitoring visits, both in the UK and in country, but a bit different. So in the UK, it would be primarily the grants team who would be visiting the UK institution, just see how they're progressing with their project and do a financial audit. And in country, it would be the mail team and the communications team along with your grant manager, who would like, so the aim of the visit is to see how the project is progressing, meet the key people who are implementing the project, and get to see how, you know, your experiences and support you in any way we can. So we will be in touch with you about that in the coming future. And yeah, I think that's it really. As I said, I will share this all with you. I appreciate I've talked quite quickly, so that you have this to hand. And obviously, please do get in touch with us at any time with any questions that you have. And just to reiterate in regards to reporting, so I know we've covered a lot about HPS, so we will be in touch about the African Grant Programme reporting dates and everything like that, but you know, the criteria, they should be fairly the same, but we'll be in touch about that.
Just one other thing I wanted to mention, and this was the just on the Grant Financial Management Toolkit. It's our first attempt at doing so, and we would really appreciate your feedback once you've had a chance to review on you know, what your thoughts are, and then also perhaps there might be other areas you think that we should be covering in that tool. So thanks. So thanks everyone. I don't think there's anything more to add. Thank you for your question, and thank you for attending. You know, get in touch with myself, Paris, Sophie, or Bea if you have any questions for us.
Thank you.